Before the uninterrupted whole, the integrated ecology, descends into duality, is cut with language, we have the sphere. The sphere is the uninterrupted cycle, the uninterrupted circle. It is the breath. Everything in life, everything we know about reality, is a fractal, nested hierarchy of circles, of spheres, of cycles, of rhythms. Right? All that we know, from our own body, from our own thoughts, to the sound of our voice, is a rhythm, is a circle, is a cycle. So it all starts there. But the one is far too complex, far too vast to grasp within the limits of our conscious mind. And so we cut the one into pieces. We divide the one into a system of symbols, a system of language that helps us interact and navigate the uninterrupted ecology of which we are a part. So what we're going to look at here is the relationship between complexity and grace, complexity and ease, and simplicity and difficulty. So let's explore the descent into the knowledge of good and evil, into the awareness of polarity. And it really is a mental descent because it's not real, right? You cannot have up without down, and so they are part of one another. You cannot have male without female. You cannot have night without day. It's meaningless, right? Every polarity exists in relationship to its supposed opposite, but really its partner. And so the one descends into two. Now, within human consciousness, within a framework of duality, within a framework of right and wrong, we look to which half of all that is the good half, and which is the bad half. Now, in truth, it depends on where we are in the cycle, right? If we're breathing in, and we've breathed in as much as we can possibly breathe in, and we've absorbed the oxygen from that breath, then the right breath is the exhale, right? But if we've breathed out as much as we possibly can, the right breath, the right one, is the inhale, right? If you've taken a step with your left foot and are leaning into that and you're about to fall over, the right step is the right foot, is to move the weight in that direction. In other words, life as a framework of nested cycles, as a framework of circles within circles, life is about the rhythm between order and chaos, male and female, up and down, in-breath and out-breath. And for life to continue involves the next step in the rhythm. For life to continue, it's all about the next stage of the circle, right? The pendulum has swung here and stopped. It's time for life to swing here, right? It's the cycle, the circle, right? The in-breath and the out-breath. If you pause, if you freeze, I'm only going to inhale. I'm never going to exhale. I'm only going to give. I'm never going to receive. I'm only going to take. I'm never going to give. If you pause at any point in the circle, in the cycle, you die, right? Life ceases to exist in your rhythm because there is no rhythm. You've become an extremist, a dogmatist. And it's not real, right? Reality is a circle. Reality is a sphere. But at any given point in time, a cult, a culture, may be leaning hard to the left and it's time to turn right, or hard to the right and it's time to turn left, hard to the inner world and it's time to go outward, hard in the outer world and it's time to come inward. It all depends on the cycle, and there are cycles within cycles within cycles, right? A civilization that's focused on exploring the world, it may be time to come home and explore our own people, our own hearts and minds, right? Some cycles are 1,000-year cycles. Some cycles are 100-year cycles. And some cycles are so fast that by the time we speak of them, they've already happened 10 trillion times, right? Subatomic particles, by the time you analyze their movement, they've moved so many more times because words have their own rhythm and they're slower than much of the cycles in life. Words have their own rhythm and they are faster than much of the cycles in life, right? One can talk about the history of humanity. You can talk about the history of the universe in tens of billions of years, and that's a long time, but it only took a few seconds to say 10 billion years ago. And similarly, we can say this quark in this subatomic structure moved to the right and then moved to the left. And meanwhile, faster than the speed of light, it's moved, right? We can't keep up with it, right? So words have their own cycle. And words are a symbol. They're not real. They're a symbol for what's real. And they're not even that, because they're a figment of our mind as we break the one into parts, right? If you cut the world in two, it's not real. It's not really two. It's no longer the world. The earth is not the earth if we took a large saw blade and really cut it in two and the molten lava flew out from the center and they spun off in different orbital patterns. Everything that we would say that's earth is rapidly changing. So we start with the one and we have two, and this is a bumpy ride, right? Imagine that gold portion. That's what we're going to focus on, because this is what we focus on with language. When we say pay attention to the beat, boom, 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 right? What we've done is we've taken the soundscape and we've divided it between silence, that which we don't hear, and that which we hear, the beat. But the beat doesn't exist without silence. The silence doesn't exist without the beat. We've just focused on half. And hopefully we've focused on the half that has something to do with the cycle that we're a part of at that time, right? Even though we think it's the be-all and end-all within a very limited mindscape, hopefully we've identified, we've attached our words, our sense of ego to the part of the cycle that matters, that relates to our next step forward in the cycle, in the circle. So this is a bumpy ride, right? You put this half-moon wheel on a car, and it's very nice when it's going around the edges, going along up here, very, very nice, right? But then, you get to the end here, and it just slices off, right? The car falls flat to the ground, and it's heavy, right? And it doesn't want to get up again, right? It's not hard. It's not easy to get off of a flat like that and get up on the point and curve around again. And this is the way we live our lives when we collapse, when our systems, our images, our maps of reality, which are incomplete. You do this and this and this, and it'll all work out, right? And it goes along, and then bang, right? It's a startling ride. It's a shocking ride. And the shock wakes us up to the imperfections of our language, the imperfection of our system. We didn't, in many cases, see it coming. We divide reality into the language of good and evil. We pursue the good, having cut the one into two, we pursue one half, and we run smack into the other half. Right? We don't know how to relate to it, right? Because we have a faulty map. It's a difficult ride. Now, as the system progresses, as it goes from 1, right, to 2, and now into 3, right? It's still bumpy, right? This is still a bumpy ride. It might even be worse, right? You put this on your car, right? It's bumpy, right? And within a paradigm where good is the system, where good is what we divide the self, we divide the world into what's good and what's bad, what's known and what's unknown, what's alive and what's dead, right? All this area, outside the circle is waste within the delusion of language, right? We have maybe the heart, the mind, and the body, right? We divide the world into 3. It's a little bit more complex. And as we move into the next cycle, this is a little bit more complex, has a little bit less waste, right? One of the things, the circle, the one, the uninterrupted ecology contains everything. When we divide it into 2, right, now it contains half of reality, and the other half is rejected from that system. It doesn't fit into that system. So there's a lot of waste. There's a lot of division. As we move back towards the circle, towards the cycle, the waste diminishes as our system gets more and more complex. There's less of a remainder. And the less remainder there is, the less garbage, right? Because that's what doesn't fit. I do this, 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 and then I repeat. That's my system, that's my cycle, right? Less is thrown out, but also as the angles begin to soften, right? It begins to get a little bit more like a circle, more like a sphere. But we have to be more conscious, right? Work-life balance, that's a polarity. There's life and there's work, right? That's a difficult system to work with. There's life and there's work, right? Here, we've got a more complex system. We've got to be aware of more things. And they all fit together as part of a cycle, right? And putting this on your car is less bumpy than a half moon or a triangle or a square, right? The angles are softening a little bit. As you move towards complexity and symmetry, there's an increase in consciousness. There's an increase in flow. There's a decrease in the illusion of waste, right? Because in the first cut, half of reality was to be thrown out, right? As we descend from the one, from the garden, the uninterrupted ecology, into the duality, into the polarity of the two, half of reality is waste. Get it out of here, right? That's bad. Get away from me, Satan, right? That's bad. This is the good half, and that's the bad half. It's a difficult system because you've got two equal halves that are fighting for supremacy, and none of them can win. You cannot win that war. If you divide your body into two parts, first of all, it collapses because the division isn't real. It's just language. But even if you keep the parts together and you divide in a mind, like your right hand has to beat your left hand, you can't win that. All you've got is two hands locked up in a fight, right? And so the descent from the garden, from paradise, from the interconnected ecology into the duality, into the illusion of separation where all of reality is divided in half, and then half of reality is at war with the other half. That is the descent into hell. That is the hellish consciousness. And it only exists in consciousness. It's not real. If you lift the language, if you lift the paradigm, if you lift the conscious mind, what you have is what was always there the whole time, the uninterrupted ecology. It's still going on in the background. It's just obscured by the knife of language, by the delusion, the illusion of human consciousness as it experiences the world through duality, through the delusion of language, right? But the delusion is getting softer now. It's getting gentler. It's getting more infused with consciousness, more complex, right? And as we continue to evolve, our sense of duality towards complexity, our simple systems, as they become more and more complex, there's less and less waste. There's more and more distinctions, right? Because each of these angles is a distinction, right? The uninterrupted circle is unconscious because there are an infinite number of lines, an infinite number of dots, an infinite number of words that go in to the uninterrupted circle, to the interconnected whole. There's an infinite number of dots and lines, and we cannot remember an infinite number of words, an infinite number of dots, an infinite number of lines. And so we simplify the innate ecology that is into the crude system of language, mathematical or verbal. It is a language of distinction. It is a language of lines. It's a language of dots, of distinct patterns. And in that system, as we descend into the knowledge of good and evil, in which half of reality is good and half of it becomes evil through that lens, we descend into hell. And as we work with that system, is that we evolve that system as we iterate that system. That system within the framework of language becomes more and more complex. And as it becomes more complex, it becomes more beautiful, becomes more graceful, just like this wheel, right? when you take the uninterrupted whole, the wheel, and you cut it into half and you put that on a car, it has become torture. And yet by this stage, this is not so bad, right? And we're only up to maybe 12 distinctions, right? This is nothing, right? We can get up to maybe 1,000 distinctions. And if we can create 1,000 distinctions, systems with 1,000 stages, the breath broken into 1,000 pieces, and then linked together again symmetrically, 1,000 spokes in the breath, in the wheel of life. Now it's starting to feel graceful. We don't run into so many dead ends, right? And so geometrically, this expresses a truth. It expresses a principle that the more complex our systems are, the more conscious we are, right? You take black and white, and you've got two parts of a system. You refract it into a billion gradations of gray, black, and white, and now you have a billion points of distinction. And if you start going through those billion points, your consciousness of color, of the endless continuums in reality, expands exponentially from 2 to a billion. Right? But at some point along the line, the gradation between this type of white and this type of white that is 1/1,000,000th lighter than this one, I can't see it. I'm not conscious enough. I'm not aware enough to see the difference, the distinction between this white and this white. I don't see it. So it's meaningless. It's meaningless. I do see the difference between black and white. Well, how high can you go as a distinct consciousness? Well, some of it is training, right? A color specialist that works with paint, for example, will notice 2 or 3 times more difference between a color. Someone that just kind of thinks, well, whitish, something like white, And of course, at our level of consciousness, maybe 100, 200, 300 types of white by different paint manufacturers. That's probably enough. We don't need a billion types of white. We wouldn't notice it. So why have a debate about a billion colors when 100 will do just fine? Or maybe 30, right? 30 types of white, that's plenty. Because nobody's going to notice the difference at our level of awareness. Right? If we're an ant, we look through a microscope, maybe it's very stunning, right? If we're close up, if that's our whole life, then more colors become important. Some cultures have many words for snow because the difference between snow melting into water and watery snow crystallizing into ice is the difference between a life and a death, is the difference between a 1-hour journey and a 3-hour journey by sled. And so it deserves a name when ice is going towards water or watery snow is going towards hard ice. That deserves a name because it matters. It has impact on the matter of our identity. So, in order to become conscious, we must create the illusion of language. We must descend into the knowledge of good and evil. And in the process, we create an illusionary battle between half of ourselves and the other half, between half of reality and the other half. And that battle creates pain, creates suffering. And the pain and the suffering facilitate an increase in consciousness. And as we increase our consciousness, the two becomes many. The black and the white become a variety of other colors. The emotional state refracts into reds and blues, angers and sadnesses. As we refract black and white through the prism, a rainbow appears. And we can break the rainbow 7 colors. We can break each color into 1,000,000 shades. 7,000,000 colors. We can break each of those, right? A computer refracts color at up to 256 million distinct combinations of light and vibration. Red 001, red 003,000, red 003,000,000, right? Computer breaks the pattern into the limits of its chip, just as we break the pattern into the limits of what we can remember. But as we follow the path of symmetry, as we pursue the path of grace, it takes us back to the circle, back to the cycle. It helps us understand the connection between death and birth. I left this job, and the identity, the pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that I developed to engage with that job died. What I identified with disintegrated. And then I found another job. Death led to life. If I hadn't let go of the old job, there wouldn't be the new job. So are they separate? If death is required for life, are they really separate? And what if the illusion of these two poles, the language, this was alive, then it was dead. What if that's brought into the color of the cycle of the circle? Something is blossoming. Something is withering. Something is blossoming, an in-breath, an out-breath. What if more and more of the cycle is embraced and we begin seeing that at any given moment, we're at different points on many, many cycles. They are not extreme. They're part of a circle. They're part of a process. And life is the process of being born, of growing, of dying, of letting go. That life is the circle, is the cycle, and that every point on that circle is necessary for life. That to drive to the 7-Eleven, the car wheel has to pass through every point. Every point of the wheel has to touch the pavement again and again and again and again. And if just one point of the wheel says, no, I'm not good enough. No, I don't deserve. The car stops. I'm not going to touch the pavement. I'm not going to show up. The car stops. Right? If the wheel can only go 360 degrees, but not 361 degrees, because one part has been banished from the circle. This is known as a curse. When we curse something, we cast it out of the circle. I want no part of you. is the language of the curse. And the language of the cursed is, I don't belong. I'm not welcome. I've been cast out. I've been shamed. I've been disowned. The language of the curse is dissociation. The language of the cursed is, I don't belong. Cursed and curse, right? The cursor and the curse both have a problem. I don't belong, so I'm not participating in the cycle, in the circle. They don't belong, right? How does the wheel turn, right? This is where you get secrets, right? Because the dirty secret is that reality doesn't work without every single part. That's the secret. Reality doesn't work without every spoke of the wheel, without every part of the breath, right? If we took one breath and we just said that this 1,000th of the breath, I don't want it. I don't want to feel that. I'm not going to breathe in any deeper, right? The cycle is shallow. Life starts to die. The cycle is shallow. There's a rejection. A curse creates a problem, creates a friction, creates a tension where energy that would be spent in the cycle is now spent to create and maintain an illusionary wall called the curse, called the unforgiven, the unforgivable, called the judgment. I can't feel that, so it's not welcome. I won't feel it, so it's not welcome. Now, life begins creating walls against life, boundaries against life, and creates prisons. Creates death. Life creates death. And that death creates life. It's innate. Parts can die so that parts can be born. To curse something is to create suffering. To bless something is to take something that was once cursed and bring it back into the circle, into the cycle. I didn't know what to do with you in this state, but now I do. Because my system has expanded. I'm more intelligent. I'm spending less energy fighting reality, and I'm spending more energy embracing it. And I can see the purpose. I can see the role that you play. You now have an honored seat at the table. First, you were the reason that I failed. Now you are my teacher of stuck and broken ideas. You haven't changed. My model of reality has changed. I have a more complex system that has a place for you at the table. Because life, that most successful of all enterprises, life that took an energy pattern this big, some tens of billions of years ago, and created multiverse, created reality, created so much space and time that the conscious mind cannot begin to fathom it, let alone live it all. Life that created all of this out of this in a mere fraction of a second for life. Life that is just getting started on its cycle of tens of trillions of years. Life that is just getting started. A mere 20 or 30 billion years into its breath. Life has a place for everything, for everyone that is sacred, that is whole. There is no distinction between that which is sacred, that which is whole, and that which is cast out. That distinction comes with the divisiveness of language, right? And as an ego and as a human being, we need language to maintain the illusion of our separation as we relate, as we create relays with the larger body, with who we are. We emerge out of the ecology, we return to the ecology, and in the meantime, we have a brief moment of pretending to be separate and looking back at all that we are, at all that we were, of all that we will be again. Whether we are a materialist and our atoms and energy came out of the great and undivided whole, look at the matter and then descend into the great and the undivided whole, dust to dust. Whether we are materialist and rejoin the vast interconnected ecology as a meaningless and unconscious journey, as long as we have the language to say those words. Or whether we are transcendent beings visiting a shape for a while and then letting it go, putting on a garment and removing it for the laundry before garmenting, before cloaking ourselves again in a new role, in a new shape, in a new pair of clothes. An I with identity, a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. That we attach ourselves to, that's me, that's me. I gotta hold on to my identity, my pattern, thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, my garment. It makes me look a certain way, play a certain role. We descend into duality, into consciousness, into the illusion of language. And then the 2 becomes 4, the 4 becomes 8, right? The words proliferate, and we begin to reclaim our relay, our relationship with the whole. The system gets more and more complex, and grace begins to return. By the time we have 64,000 words, by the time we have 64,000 points in the uninterrupted whole, the wheel starts to feel smooth again. Reality that was once a frightening and painful place, cutting ourselves with words into 2, fearfully battling one part of ourself with the other, becomes a landscape, becomes a cycle. Joyful celebration of sadness, of bitterness, of death, of joyful celebration, of sweet and sour, of beauty and jarring disconnection. That's life. So to work with this truth, to work with this, how complex is your system and how symmetrical is it? Because if you cut the world into 2 and then make a 1,000-point cycle with half of the sphere in polarity, we're the good people, they're the bad people, you're not going to move towards grace. You're going to move towards greater and greater consciousness of polarity, of separation. To move towards grace, to move towards integration, to move towards intelligence, It's about evolving the circle as a whole into more and more awareness. Understanding that the purpose of the words is to allow us to think, to allow us to be aware through the lens of language, to look back at who we are. But we've never left the uninterrupted whole, the undifferentiated ecology, the garden that gives rise to all things, and in the exhale gives birth, and in the inhale gives death. Right? We've never left the cycle. We've never left the circle. It's all around us at a trillion different scales. And the journey of life, the universe, the multiverse, is just beginning. Life is not on a deadline. You may be excited to see what's there, but with 10 trillion stars and counting, with billions and billions of energy forms, with the potential to give rise to an ecology as rich and diverse as Earth, life's got time to explore all the probabilities, all the possibilities, refracted through the lens of language, breaking the one into many. And life's got time to put it all together again as that lens is put down. And the uninterrupted whole that never left resumes its rhythm.